वेलकम टू वीलर्न में आपका स्वागत है. We are discussing research report writing, session 14, research report writing. Topics to be covered are meaning of the research reports, type of research report, contents of report, styles of reporting, steps in drafting reports, editing the final draft, and evaluating the final draft. Meaning of research report. Research report basically means the communication of all kind of experiences which are undertaken at the time of research, and these are communicated to the other parties. It is a formal statement about the research processes and the results therefore. Furthermore, it helps in narrating the problem which was studied, the methods which were used, and finally the findings of the research problem and the conclusion of the study. The very purpose of the research report is basically to communicate in a formal manner to all the interested parties about the methodology which is used to conduct the problem search, and thereby finding out the results and then communicating the results to the interested party, and the manner in which the research process has taken place, so that they understand what actually happened during the research. When we talk about the characteristics of a research report, first important characteristic is, yes, it is very narrative and very descriptive. Also, it is an authoritative document on the outcome of the research reports. Secondly, it represents a very specific information which is clearly designated for a very specific audience. And lastly, it is very simple, it is accurate and a readable form of communications. When we talk about the functions of research report basically serves as a means for presenting the problems under studies, the methods and the techniques which are used for collecting and analyzing data, findings and conclusions and recommendations. Now there are three major functions. First, it is a means for judging the quality of the research project. Second, it is a means for evaluating the researcher's competency. And lastly, it provides a systematic knowledge on the problems and issues which are analyzed. Now when we talk about the types of research report, the first type is of technical reports. When we talk about technical reports, it is a very comprehensive and full report of the research process, and its outcomes, they are included in technical reports. It also covers all the aspects of the research process, a description of the problem which is under study, the objective of the study, the methods and the techniques which are used, and a detailed account of the sampling filed and other research procedures. Furthermore, it also includes the sources of data, the tools which are used for data collection, methods of data processing and analysis, and detailed findings and conclusions and furthermore suggestions. The second is called as popular reports. So a popular report, the reader is basically less interested in the methodological details, but here he is more interested in the findings of the study. Complicated statistics, they are avoided, and more of pictorial devices are used in case of popular reports. After a bit of introduction to the problem and the objectives of the study, an abstract of the findings of the study, the conclusions and the recommendations, they are presented. More headlines underlining pictures and graphs, they are used, and sentences and paragraphs, they need to be very short in case of popular reports. Third type of report is interim report. When there is a time lag between the data collection and the presentation of the result, there is the study which may lose their significance and its usefulness. So an interim report in such a scenario can narrate what has happened and what has been done so far and what was its outcome. It also presents a summary of the findings of the part of analysis which has been completed. The fourth is the summary report. Summary report is meant for all the lay audiences, that is general public. It is basically written in very non-technical and simple language with pictorial charts that just contains the objectives, findings and the implication. It is a short report of 2 to 3 pages. Fifth is the research abstract. It is a kind of a short summary of technical report that we talk about. It is prepared by a doctoral student at the time of submitting of his or her thesis, and it contains a presentation of the statements of the problem. Now the objective of the study, methods and techniques used, overview of the reports, they are also included there. A brief summary of the results of the study can also be used here. Then come research article. When we talk about research article, it is basically designed for publication in a professional journal. A research article, it must be clearly written in a very concise and unambiguous language. Furthermore, it must be logically organized. Progression from a statement of a problem and the purpose of the study through analysis of evidence to the conclusion and implications are given in the report. When we talk about contents of research report, now the outline of a research report first contains a prefatory items. When we talk about prefatory items, it includes title page, it also includes declaration, it includes certificates, it includes preface or acknowledgement, then comes table of content, list of table, list of graphs, figures or charts which are used in the report, and finally the abstract or the synopsis. Then comes the body of the report. Now body of the report, the first part is the introduction. Introduction which gives a detail about the project. Then comes the theoretical background of the topic. Then statement of the problem which is under study in the research report. Then comes review of the literature on the specific problem. Then the scope of the study, the objectives of the study, hypothesis to be tested, and definition of the concept, the methodology which is used, and the sources of data. Then comes the reference material. The reference material section includes the bibliography, the appendix, copies of data collection instruments, technical details on sampling plan, complex tables, and glossary of new terms. When we talk about styles of reporting, the first is communicate to the specific audience. Now the first step is basically to know the audience, their background and the objective. So the most effective presentation, it seems to be live conversation or memos to a particular person as opposed to an amorphous group. So audience identification, it affects the presentation decisions, which could be the selection of materials to be included and the level of presentation. Furthermore, excessive details or materials presented at low level can be boring also. So the audience can become irritated when material perceived as relevant is excluded or the material which is presented at too high a level. So in an oral presentation, the presenter, he can ask audience whether they already know some of the material or not. Then frequently what happens at presentation, it must be addressed to two or more different audiences. There are ways to deal with such a problem. In a written presentation, an executive summary at the outset can be provided so that an overview of the conclusion for the benefits of those in the audience who are not interested in the details is met. Second is the structure of the presentation. So each piece of the presentation should fit into the whole, just as individual pieces they fit into a jigsaw puzzle. So the audience, they should not be muttering. The solution to this is to provide a very well defined structure. The structure, it should include an introduction, a body and a summary. Furthermore, each of the major sections should be structured similarly. The percept is to tell the audience what you are going to say and then tell them what you just said. So introduction, it plays several roles. The first role it plays is to provide audience about the interest. Second function is to identify the presentation's central idea or the objective. And the third, it is to provide a roadmap to the rest of the presentation so that the audience can picture its organization and the flow. Now it is better to divide the body of the presentation into 2 to 5 parts. The audience will be able to observe only so much information. If that information, it can be aggregated into chunks, it will be easier to assimilate. Now the purpose of the presentation summary is basically to identify and underline the important points of the presentation and to provide some repetition of their content. The third is create audience interest. The audience, they should be motivated to read or to listen to the presentation's major part. And to the individual element of each section, the audience should know why the presentation is relevant to them. Now, as the analysis proceeds and the presentation is being prepared, the researcher, he should be on a lookout for the result that are exceptionally persuasive or relevant, interesting and unusual. Sometimes the deviant respondents, they have this strange answer. They also provide a lot of insight into his or her responses, alright, that could further be persuaded or discarded. Then comes be specific and visual. It is very important to avoid taking or writing in the abstracts. So if different members of the audience, they have different or vague understanding of the important concept, there is a potential problem. The terms that are ambiguous or not well known should be defined and illustrated. And if that could not happen, they should better be omitted. So the most interesting presentation, they usually use specific stories or anecdotes or studies or incidents to make point. Then lastly is address validity and reliability issues. So the presentation should help the audience avoid misinterpreting the results. The wordings of the questions, the order in which they are asked, and the sampling designs, they are among the design dimensions that can lead to biased results and misinterpretation. So the presentation should not include an exhaustive description of all the design consideration. Nobody is interested in a textbook discussion. The presentation should include some indication of the reliability of the results also. At the minimum, it always should be clear what sample was involved. Now when we talk about the steps which are involved in drafting the research report. Along with the related skills of working with and motivating people, the ability to communicate effectively is undoubtedly a very important attribute a manager can possess. So, effective communication between the research users and the research professional is extremely important to the research process. The formal presentation, it usually plays a very important role in the communication effort. There is the presentation of the research result. Now there are certain guidelines for successful presentation. The first one is it should communicate to a specific audience. The structure of the presentation is very important. Then create audience's interest. Furthermore, be specific and usual. Then address validity and reliability issues. This is what we have discussed in our previous slide also. Then comes editing the final draft. So a research report basically requires a very clear organization. Each chapter and unit, it must be divided into 2 or more sections with appropriate headings, and each section margin, heading and paragraph heading, it may be used to indicate the subject shift. Now physical presentation is another aspect of the organization. A page should not be fully filled in from top to the bottom. That must be considered. There should be wider margin on both the sides and on top and bottom also. Now the centered section heading is provided in the center of the page, and it is usually in solid font size. Marginal headings is basically used for subdivision in each section. So it starts from the left side margin without leaving any space. Then comes paragraph heading. It is used to head an important aspect of this subject. So there is some space between the margin and this heading. Now presentation should be free from spelling and grammatical errors. Use of the rules of the punctuation is very important. Use of present tense for presenting the finding of the study and for stating the generalization. Masculine nouns and pronouns should not be used when the content refers to both the genders. Abbreviations should not be used. Spellings should be correct. Footnote citations as indicated by placing an index number is very, very important. Then comes evaluating the final draft. So the general guidelines which are discussed so far, they are applicable to both the written and the oral presentations. However, it is very important to generate a research report that will be an interesting to read. So what happens, most researchers, they are not trained in effective report writing. In their enthusiasm for research, they often overlook for a good report writing style. So while writing a report, long sentences should be reconsidered and only the critical main points, they should stand out. Now there are certain hints while writing an effective report writing. First, using the main heading and subheadings to communicate the content of the material discussed. Present tense usage is very much important as far as communicating the information. Whether the presentation is written or oral, active voice construction should be used to make it more lively and interesting, and computer generated tables or graphs, they need to be used. Only information headings to be used, and use double side presentation whenever it is possible. Now there are 2 exercises. What are the types of research reports, and draw an outline of the research reports. Thank you and have a nice day. Keep learning and relearning.